So good morning. Welcome to the Texas Capitol. I'm Steve Alamon with Disability Rights Texas, and we're calling a press conference today for the 88th Legislature to take action to stop the senseless abuse of students with disabilities in our Texas public schools. Texas serves over 600,000 students with disabilities. Their needs range quite considerably, just like their impairments. But one thing that is troubling that affects many of them is the not just lack of quality services, but more basically, decent treatment at school. School districts in Texas are allowed to use various techniques on students with disabilities that are known as restraints. Restraints are physical holds to control a student's bodily movements. Well, that might be necessary in some very limited circumstances. Tragically, those restraints are happening more and more violently to students with disabilities across Texas. We're here today to hear some stories of families that have experienced these tragedies, and we're going to be hearing from advocates who are champions for students with disabilities around this state talk about solutions as the 88th legislature begins. And then finally, thankfully, we know that there are sympathetic ears here at the Texas Capitol, and we'll hear from some lawmakers who will express their concern and commitment to making change happen. So first, we're going to hear from some parents whose children have experienced these violent restraints in Texas public schools. And I'm going to start with a parent from the Houston area, Gina.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to share Leah's story. My name is Gina Tenbrink, and we're from Restraint, Texas. I'm the co-founder of Project Leah, Leaders Ending Abuse and Harm of Students with Disabilities in Texas Schools. My daughter Leah is 16 years old and diagnosed with autism, a speech impairment, and an intellectual disability. Leah was a vibrant, silly, aspiring athlete who loved to try new foods and visit new places. She has spent her entire education in a self-contained classroom with children of varying degrees of disability. Leah is mostly non-speaking, meaning she can clearly tell you what she wants to eat, but she is unable to tell you if she's hurt or in pain, and she has no concept of danger. When she was in middle school, Leah started to come home with unexplained bruises, scratch marks, and bite marks. I was starting to receive phone calls from the school to pick her up early because she was having major meltdowns. She would often scream and cry when her bus pulled up to the school, and soon after, her behaviors escalated at home. I later found out she was routinely put in a dark bathroom and frequently restrained. I had no idea at the time what was happening in the classroom. After multiple failed attempts, I was finally given access to heavily edited video footage. I witnessed teachers cursing, provoking, and demeaning my daughter. I watched male students kick and violate her privacy in the bathroom. I witnessed two teachers hold Leah face down on the floor with both arms behind her back as her legs lifted in the air as she struggled to breathe. Restraint is not a one-time act. Repercussions last for a very long time. The trauma that Leah endured is not something that she can process through counseling. Her security and safety in school have been violated, and 3 years later, she still continues to struggle. That once smiling, vibrant, secure little girl is no longer there. The girl who loved to spend time with her sisters now watches them with fleeting interest. She is easily frightened, quick to anger, and mostly likes to be alone. But the burden is not only hers to bear. I am still struggling. Her father and her sisters are still struggling. We no longer trust the school system. We have been left with overwhelming feelings of betrayal and guilt, and it has resulted in many sleepless nights. School administration has been able to avoid accountability and repercussions for their abusive and harmful actions for far too long. Without proper educator training, parent education, legislative and local action, cases of mistreatment of students with disabilities will continue to rise. And those teachers that traumatized and mistreated my daughter, well, they are both still teaching. One of them in a self-contained classroom with students just like Leah, so the cycle will continue. Leah has the right to learn in an environment free of physical, verbal, and emotional abuse. We can start by ending harmful and dangerous restraints. Thank you for your time.
My name is Tatiana Alfano. This is my son, Quentin. We came from Round Rock ISD. In April last year, Quentin's school called me to tell me that he was in crisis. They said that he fell and hit his head while he was assaulting the staff. I assure you, he was not assaulting the staff. The school officials assured me he was fine, and they followed up with details in an email. Much of it lies, and I believed them. Quentin came home with a knot in his head, and he had told me what happened. He was a special education student in the 8th grade with an individualized education plan, a behavioral intervention plan, and attended a special campus for children who need intensive assistance in RISD. He was violently and intentionally thrown into a brick wall into a seclusion room by his vice principal at a public school for children with IEPs. When Quentin postured at the teachers in his own defense, he was unlawfully restrained for an extraordinary length of time in the lethal, prone, face-down position with 2 teachers on his back and shoulders. The 2 female teachers seen witnessing and trying to hold the vice principal back during the attack were the same ones to hold Quentin down in the restraint and did not report the incident for over 2 weeks. Only after I saw the video. Despite Quentin's outcries of abuse, not a single professional made an attempt to make a report in those 2 weeks either. While cameras in the special education classrooms made the discovery of this crime possible only because my son was verbal enough to tell me about it, they did nothing to prevent it. The school nor the staff were held accountable for their actions, even to this day. And with over 100 restraints reported every month by our ISD alone, who is to say that those restraints are being performed safely and ethically? What if it was your child?
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Thelma Lira. I reside in Donna, Texas with my husband and our 3 children. I'm here today to tell you the unfortunate story of what happened to our youngest son, Damien. Damien was enrolled in pre-K 3 at M. Rivas Elementary School in Donna ISD for the 2021-2022 school year, during which Damien, along with his classmates, Isabel and Ryan, were subject to abuse in their special education classroom. Due to Damien's diagnosis of ADHD, autism, and a speech delay, my son's school journey was to begin in a special education class to best accommodate his needs. However, it was discovered that restraints were being used on my son and was repeatedly tied down to his chair throughout the school day. Classroom video footage, verbal and written statements from his teacher, teacher assistants, and staff all concurred that the restraints were used on my sons and his classmates repeatedly. However, due to the current law and definition in regard to the use of restraints in school, no legal action was taken against the people responsible for this horrendous act. The CPS case investigations were closed due to no reason to believe, with the ruling that no form of abuse took place, and therefore CPS did not pursue the case and no charges were filed. CPS's rationale was that by definition, the abuse could not be proven, even though the act of repeated restraint was clearly visible in the classroom video footage. To this day, the teacher and aides are free to continue working in schools with children with special needs, and the administration continues leading the school that they neglected to keep safe for our children. My son went from being a happy little boy to having constant nightmares, grinding his teeth at night, which his doctor stated was an indication of repeated stress, having meltdowns and emotional distress at the sight of a chair that uses a belt such as a high chair or a car seat. It has taken a great deal of mental and emotional effort to pick up the pieces in understanding why this happened to my son and why no one is being held responsible for the mistreatment he and his classmates have endured. I wish my son had the ability to use his own voice to tell me what was happening to him, but he simply couldn't, and this breaks my heart. But I am his voice today, and by telling you his story, there is one clear message that is being sent out to all, and that is that the use of restraints is allowed on children with special needs, will not be ruled as abuse, and most shockingly, it carries no consequence. I stand here today for my son Damien, for Isabel and Ryan and their parents, and ask our lawmakers to help bring a resolution to the obvious issues and downside on the use of restraints. You are the key and our vessel to making the necessary changes that are very much needed for the future and prevent children having to experience the indignity that Damien, Isabel, and Ryan went through, or as a parent, having to feel the guilt, helplessness, and emotional trauma that we have endured. Please help, and thank you for your time.
We've heard from 3 very brave families who are willing to come to Austin, to come meet with lawmakers to speak about this horrific problem. I want those who are watching to know that this room is full of other parents whose stories are just as compelling that we just don't have time to share with you. They are available for media interviews afterwards, but for now and moving forward about what do we do about this problem, I'm bringing up fellow advocacy organizations to speak to solutions.
Good morning. As Stephen mentioned, unfortunately, there are many, many, many more stories like this across the state. I want to thank all of you for being here, especially our parents who've spoken and shared their story. It's not easy. My name is Jolene Sanders Foster, and I'm the Advocacy Director at the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities, and I'm also a parent. We've just heard very compelling stories, and I think our last speaker outlined some of the gaps in policies, some of the problems, in addition to ending the use of violent restraints and unnecessary use of force. We need to address accountability. One of the ways that we, my colleague Jackie Benestante will outline a few other recommendations, but I just want to outline 3 right now. In the state of Texas, our penal code allows for almost blanket immunity for any educator who harms a student. We need to address that. We need to make sure that any use of force is limited to the emergency to keep a student safe, other students safe, not these actions that we've been hearing about. We've heard about restraints. We hear regularly from parents about hitting, dragging, pushing, pinching, and biting. Yes, biting. So we are calling on lawmakers to address this during this legislative session, to revise the penal code to clarify what is justifiable use of force on a student. Secondly, in 2015, our legislature took a step in the right direction when the cameras bill was passed. However, we're still seeing far too many cracks. We are asking for better utilization of video surveillance with vulnerable students with disabilities. We're asking for schools to notify parents of cameras in the classroom law. We also want to require schools to keep the footage on file for a longer period of time. As you've heard, many of these instances are not notified, parents are not notified in a timely manner. And by that time, the footage could be erased. We want this to be stored for a longer period of time. We also want to ease restrictions and challenges that many parents face when trying to obtain access to video footage. As an example, we often hear that the school district says they will review the footage and determine if there's any indication of And what happens is they come back and say no, so there's no need for the parent to view it. We also want to make sure that school districts have the resources and the funding to be able to maintain these cameras in these classrooms. Third, we have something in Texas called the Do Not Hire Registry for educators who have harmed students, who have had improper relationships with students. We need to heighten accountability by adding teachers or other staff who have harmed students, including those who resign in lieu of termination. This is often referred to, some of you may know, as pass the trash. We want to require Texas to track and make public the number of incidents referred for prosecution and where those cases are being referred. Again, I want to commend these parents. This is not easy. This is a priority for the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities and many, many of our partner organizations who are here today. I will call up Jackie Benestante to outline some more policy recommendations.
Hi, I'm Jackie Benestante, and I'm the Executive Director of the Autism Society of Texas. I'd also like to thank the parents for being here today, and as some people have mentioned, we get so many calls and emails from across the state about these kind of things, and we could be here for, I feel like, days talking about all these stories that are so awful and just need to not be happening anymore. Today, we join disability advocates to call for improved independent investigations by the Department of Family and Protective Services of alleged abuse in public schools. Because of the shocking increases in the reporting of incidents of abuse in our public schools, we need to modify the Texas Family Code definition of the term abuse to clarify that Child Protective Services may make a finding of abuse when a teacher or an aide uses violent restraint or seclusion in a manner that is not in compliance with federal and state laws and regulations. CPS has a role to play as an independent watchdog over these cases and must have clear direction to call an illegal restraint the abuse that it is. Advocates also demand greater investment in proactive and positive behavioral interventions, supports, and services in our schools. Our focus is not just on the consequences for excessive force and violent restraint. We also want to see Texas teachers be the most well-trained in positive behavioral interventions and supports, and equipped with the tools they need to be proactive, not reactive. Education service centers should be required to provide school staff the proper training to interact appropriately and safely when working with students with disabilities. Last, and of utmost importance, we ask that Texas ban dangerous prone and supine restraints and implement the long-standing federal recommendations to stop utilization of prone and supine restraints in schools. We call for an end to the use of dangerous prone restraints when a student is laying face down, and we call on a ban of other restraints that also restrict breathing. These dangerous restraints should never be used. They cause injury, trauma, and even death, as we all know. Supine physical restraint, when a student is restrained face up, means holding a student holding a student on their back using physical force to restrict the student's movement. According to recent data by the United States Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, 80% of restraints and 77% of seclusions are being done to disabled children in public schools. Children that are restrained and secluded are often children with a history of trauma. There is no evidence that using restraint or seclusion is an effective tool in reducing the occurrence of problematic behaviors that frequently precipitate the use of these techniques. And as we've heard, they often cause trauma, mental or physical, long-lasting trauma to the family and to the student with the disability. We've shared the ideas of advocates and parents, but it takes legislators to make a difference. There's a lot of work to be done, and we are grateful that we have legislators that support students with disabilities and are committed to their safety and well-being, some of whom you'll be hearing from today. Representative Dr. Mary Gonzalez is our legislative sponsor for this press conference, and we'll begin. Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez.
First and foremost, I want to thank the families and the students who are here telling their stories and showing so much courage being here. I also want to thank my colleagues who are outstanding. I always talk about how the Texas House is able to do so many amazing things, and I think Representative Hall had a really big bill that the Texas House did get passed, and so I'm looking forward to hearing her words, and I want to thank the disability rights advocates and organizers. Y'all do this work every single day to help legislators do what we need to do. If anyone looks at my record, you know how much I love public schools and public education. I've got a PhD in it, but part of being a legislator is making sure we are setting up our schools, our teachers, our students, our families for success. We can't hear story after story and say that we don't have a responsibility to do something. We can't know that there are still gaps in legislation or public policy that need to be addressed when students' lives are in harm. There is a wonderful way to balance supporting our educators and but making sure that our kids and our families are healthy and safe. We are asking for very simple policy changes to make sure that the stories that we heard never happen again. We're asking for transparency. We're asking for accountability. We're asking for being proactive versus reactive. These are not giant things that are politicized, but very common sense recommendations to ultimately put our most vulnerable and our most cherished children's lives in the most healthy and safe environment. I am so grateful that this is a team of people, families, advocates, legislators from all sides of the aisle are coming together, and that's the way democracy works. So I hope that today's greater awareness about what's happening will bring more people to the conversation to say, let's create schools, let's create environments that set up our young people for success and have them be in a community, in a school environment that they want to engage in, want to feel supported by. And so, and it just takes these small little things, accountability, transparency, and proactivity. So with that, I'd like to welcome my colleague and friend, Representative John Busey from Central Texas, who has also been such a wonderful advocate on this issue.
Thank you, Representative Dr. Gonzalez, for your support. She's been a true leader in this space fighting for our kids. I want to thank the press for being here and covering these stories. I want to thank our advocates and especially our families who shared their stories. When the stories were being shared, we saw a lot of tear-filled eyes in the room. These stories are painful and they're real and they shouldn't exist, and we need to make sure that we're doing our part so this stuff doesn't happen to our kids in the future. As a parent, when we send our children to school, we expect that they will be in a safe environment that is conducive to their learning and growth. Safe from violence, safe from bullying and harassment, safe from discrimination, and empowered to become the best versions of themselves. But we know that in spite of our best intentions and aspirations, that isn't always the case. Even more so for children who may be more vulnerable and less able to advocate for themselves. As state lawmakers, we have a unique duty to ensure that the right to a public education is a reality for all Texas children, including children with disabilities and special needs. As a legislature, we have to continue to update laws and procedures to match best practices, reflect changes in societal attitudes and knowledge, and be more cognitive of trauma and neurodiversity. It's imperative that we continue to expand on that work. It's not in question that Texas has fallen short, not just in upholding access to services, but when it comes to matters of school safety and student discipline. I'm grateful to my colleagues who are here today for their thoughtful leadership and the care they have paid to this issue. And I hope we can work together to build consensus and achieve measurable progress this legislative session. A lot of attention will be paid to the budget, this extra surplus we have this year, and that will dominate headlines. But what I hope will also be true is that we will pay equal attention and priority to children like Quentin, who stands behind me, and these families and their stories. Our kids can't wait. Every day that we delay, that we fail to remedy these tragic interactions, is another child that we risk traumatizing and harming, physically and emotionally, and another family who must endure these heartbreaking realities. So what can we do as a group? We can increase training, transparency, and reporting. We can strengthen protocols and clarify what's allowable and what's not allowable. We can ensure that we are aligning with best practices around de-escalation and redirection and avoiding restraint and seclusion outside of when emergencies may call for such an intervention. Our greatest responsibility as a society is the care and safeguarding of our children. We all have a role to play in creating systems and structures where each of our kids can thrive. There are no easy answers or magic solutions. These are complex issues with moving parts that require careful consideration and attention to detail to get it right. I know myself and my colleagues who stand up here today and so many others in this building are committed to having that tough conversation, working with these families and advocacy groups, and finding solutions so every kid can go to school and come home learning and safe every single day. Thank you all for being here. I want to bring up my colleague, Representative Lacey Hull.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you to my colleagues and the advocates, and thank you to Disability Rights Texas for inviting me here today with all of you, and thank you to the parents who shared their heartbreaking stories and opening up and just sharing those stories. I know how hard that must be to share that about your children. Last session, I filed legislation that would have outlawed the use of restraints or chemical irritants on children 10 years and younger in school settings. Clearly, as we have heard, the use of restraints disproportionately affects students with disabilities, many of whom are experiencing an emotional episode where handcuffs or other restraints only exacerbates the situation and inflicts even more trauma on the student, their peers, their families, educators, and even the school resource officers involved. Although this bill overwhelmingly passed the House, it ran up against Senate deadlines last session. I am proud to have filed No Kids in Cuffs, again, as my first bill of this session, HB 459. I'm grateful that Senator West has filed the companion SB 133. I truly believe that no one wants to handcuff a child. There are de-escalation and intervention strategies that are designed for these situations. By explicitly stating in law that no, you cannot restrain a student, we hope to protect children from these traumatic incidents that we have heard about today. Again, thank you to everyone who has worked to support the disability community, and I look forward to working with you all again to get No Kids in Cuffs across the finish line this session. And I'd like to bring up my colleague, Representative Rico.
So I'm the last one, so I'll be brief. I just also wanted to thank the parents and the students who shared their story today. I know it can be intimidating in this big building and these bright lights and all these cameras, but by showing up and sharing your story, that's how we make true change happen in this place. So thank you for being here. I think we're all here because we share a simple belief that no child should be hurt in our public schools. And I look forward to working with my colleagues, Representative Hull, Dr. Gonzalez, Representative Busey, to gather stakeholders, listen to those who are directly impacted, find root causes, and hopefully craft solutions that will protect all of our students, especially our students with disabilities. So thank you for being here, and I'm looking forward to working with you all this session.
Thank you, lawmakers, for showing the commitment to this issue and for solutions to be brought forward in the 88th legislature. At this time, we have an opportunity for members of the press who are here to ask questions, first of parents, second of advocates, and finally, and most respectfully though, the lawmakers will come last. We want to highlight our parents as special guests here in terms of press inquiries. Otherwise, everyone will be available for one-on-one media interviews following this event. But if we do have a moment now, if anyone wants to bring forward a question, we'll field that now. Okay, well, we have one, yes. Let's go ahead and take it then.
that a couple of things. Thank you for your question. First is, both Representative Hall and I both have bills talking about restraints. I the last legislative session served as vice chair of the Appropriations Committee. One of the things we hear over and over regarding cameras is just the cost to schools. So there is something that I'm looking into from an appropriation standpoint. It isn't legislation, but more of a rider that looks into making sure schools have the funding necessary to do cameras and to have them. And I think that the Public Education Committee heard over the interim work on things collectively on greater access to footage and or making them more accessible to families. And so I think that there is a tapestry of things happening in regards to legislative work in this area. I think that we've heard lots of recommendations when it comes to the video cameras and video cameras in our classrooms, and I think that all of us understand that these tools have been really helpful for families that have transparency. We all talk about wanting to increase transparency, so that is something that we are collectively working on. And I think if you give me we can give you a bill number, but I don't have that with me right now. Okay.
Great. Well, then we want to thank our parents for being so brave again to attend this press conference. This event would not have been possible without the devotion to this issue at the from board of directors to staff leadership of these organizations that called this event and made it happen. But I want you to know that advocates around the state who are not able to be here stand in support with our calls for action. And again, I want to thank our lawmakers who were able to be present today, but know that we also have other allies here at the Capitol that we're counting on, and we look forward to a productive 88th legislature. So at this time, we'll conclude our event. Thank you.